ideas that we had was creating a hotel key card that has a QR code about the 250 that we can start passing out right away to travelers that are coming to area either for leisure or for business, and then would come back for leisure with their families. And if that pen doesn't work, or if that QR code on the key card doesn't work with our hotel systems, we could also do it on a business card. Tom also mentioned that he goes out to a lot of hotels and restaurants when he's there, and he always asks the staff where to go and what to do. And the staff, they're all our line level employees that are possibly not educated on what's going on with 250 or what's in the area. So one of the things that we wanted to start with is to educate our staff so that those college students or those people that are implants to this area are familiar with what's in the area. Laurel Highlands used to have a backyard tour that they took line level staff out to see Falling Water and the museums and Fort Lanier and all those locations, and then they were able to refer guests back to these areas. There's also a map that Laurel Highlands gives out, so if we could put something like that on there with different locations for the 250, again, just more stuff for them to hand out to people. And our staff often wants to know what's in it for me. Why am I going to watch this video, or why am I going to do this? So we also thought about some sort of punch card similar to the Pour Tour, that when our staff goes to these locations or watches a video about those areas, they could then get a punch card, and maybe they get a coffee mug or a backpack or a Go Laurel Highlands t-shirt or America's 250 something. So some sort of reward for them to be educated in order to educate the travelers that we're trying to get to the area. Again, in collaboration with the historic sites for our hotel lodging. Not all of the historic sites might have overnight accommodations listed on their websites because it might be more of a day tour in your minds currently. But what we're trying to do with this program is to bring everybody back and make it a couple of day program. So creating a place for them to stay overnight at one of the locations. Bus tours. We talked about making an itinerary for a bus tour so that people could come to the area and pick up the tour at Laurel Highlands or at a hotel site, and then be able to get on this bus, and the bus would take them to 5 or 6 or 10 locations through the area, and that would help to bring revenue to the hotels, to the museums, to all these locations that in turn will put money back into the area. We have the hotel tax money that is collected, and then, as a lot of you know, the hotel tax funds are then put into a grant that we all have the capability to get money back from there to help our organizations, nonprofits, and marketing to the area. So the piece that Dawn mentioned earlier, revenue, is also important to this. It's not just what we're bringing, the education to the people. And then, we also said about reaching out if any of us are with national corporations, like we represent Hilton and Marriott here, so we're sure that those companies should have something in place for America's 250, and I'm sure they've got committees sitting in rooms like this too that are going to then pass out those brochures and things to the world, So we want to make sure that we reach out to those companies too and find out what they're doing and bring it back into our area.
Is there like a two-way street communication like between you and Hilton, or you guys and Marriott, that you would say, we have these initiatives going for the 250 and we want the national organization to know about what we're doing, or is it more like top down?
Yeah, we're like the small hotel in Uniontown, so I don't know how much Mr. Marriott or Hilton's teams will listen to us, but it's worth putting it out there for sure.
Yeah, thank you.
Get back to you on that.
A girl can drink.
Yeah, that's the point. We're gonna try.
Okay, thank you. Those were great. You guys want to go next?
Sure.
We have a couple of ideas here. I'll just touch on one, which was, what if we could create tours kind of like following the frontier from Philadelphia to here. And the tours could have different themes, like you could have transportation of whiskey one direction, or back the other direction, or how it was shipped, and maybe that involves the Occoquan River and different modes of transportation. You know, it could be a hiking trail or bike trail, and you camp along the way, but you're following in the footsteps of an actual thing and how that thing or that person moved across our region. And it would be really interesting if it just happened to be a 250-mile stretch, you know, to tie in with that theme. But you could pick up businesses along the way, kind of like the old torch coming through your town, and everybody has a way to pass it off to the next little stop, and it might involve businesses along the way or hotels and those sorts of things. And then we also had a film idea.
Yeah, because we have our videographer as inspiration. We kind of thought about sort of a history in a minute video or film program that we could institute at the local high schools, colleges, tech schools. It could be like a capstone project and have the students get involved with the historical sites or museums, just to create a little, 1 or 2 minute video that could be shared on social media. I think like a drunk history in a minute, kind of a theme, educational but still fun. And that way we're incorporating students, getting them excited about history, but also reaching the wider public.
Did we capture everybody's ideas?
We had a lot of great discussion over here. We really started out by wanting to create some sort of opportunity, whether it is like a bus tour or just like a, different spots, to help people really start connecting the dots between all of our places and the history. Because once you really start doing that, it gets super exciting, and really targeting just the local residents here to inform everybody about all the amazing history sites and institutions that we have in this region. And actually, while you all were talking too, I thought too, then, we could even plan like a trip to Dunfermline, Scotland to make the connections there, because I've been there, and that's where John Forbes lived, the Hackett's, who were, 2 of them were killed at the Battle of the Monongahela, and one survived and was on the Forbes campaign, and then was with him when he named it Pittsburgh, and Andrew Carnegie was born in that town, and there's all sorts of, we could even have that sort of connection beyond. Once people get really excited about what happened here, that to me is the fun of history, is just how incredibly connected everything is, and boy, do we live in a region, as historian David McCullough famously said, you can tell the whole history of the United States from this region, from Pittsburgh. So that was a really exciting thought of how do we start connecting the dots for the people that live here. And of course, people that visit this region will be interested in that too. But if you start with that target audience of just educating everybody here about all the amazing things. And then also creating some roundtable discussions to have some of the difficult conversations about the challenges of commemorating history like this, like we sort of brought up earlier on, bringing lots of perspectives, creating like a safe space environment to be able to grapple with some of these issues. We also talked about that's really an entryway to young people too. They may not be as interested in George Washington interpreting to them as they might of like Hercules, his chef who ran away, his enslaved chef who ran away. Or William Lee, who saw the whole revolution right next to him as his manservant, or to be able to tap into really incredible, groundbreaking interpreters to bring in that perspective. Like, if you're familiar with Cheney McKnight of Not Your Mama's History, please check her out. She's doing some really incredible stuff, and mainly based in Harlem, but she travels, and she's certainly not alone in those efforts. Of presenting the Black experience throughout history in America. And so really looking for those kind of quality, innovative interpreters that are still going to be telling that history, but just from enriching it through that perspective as an entryway to reach a younger audience, to get kids excited about history again, because we all know that is a challenge. And so, really trying to also get their perspective of what would be interesting to them. I know we're forming like a teen council at the art museum just to start to see like, well, what do you, like, you know, sort of what do you see as you being part of this museum or this community or this historic site? You know, how can we get others in your generation interested as well? And then really just being able to combine art, history, and culture, again, in these sort of more innovative ways, and then reflecting on how, you know, the way we are commemorating today compared to in 1976. You know, what do we know now? What do we know then? How has like our culture and society changed, and how does that inform the way that we commemorate something like this? And you should really check out what's happening in Brownsville with some of these programs that were being shared, because many of these elements are happening and have been very inspiring to our discussion. Is there anything I missed?
You're doing pretty good.
Okay, great. Thank you.
So we're just going around.
Yeah, that's fine.
I learned something that I didn't know. So maybe some of you are aware and maybe you are not, but there's an American tapestry that will be created, 13 colonies and 13 different stories. So you bring in the craftsmanship that was and has been a part of our country and weaving it through 13 different stories. I'm going to read because Linda shared this with us. But each panel showcases an individual from an historically underrepresented group, so we bring that into play, who demonstrated an act of courage or ingenuity during our struggle for independence. So I think we're hearing kind of a theme as we go throughout the course of the day. When it is completed, it will start at the College of William and Mary in Williamsburg. The second stop will be at Seton Hill University, but we also felt, and I'll turn this over to you, how can we bring it to life?
Exactly. So my husband writes plays. So we were discussing the likelihood of creating theatrical tableaus for each tapestry. We're talking about 5 to 10 minutes per tapestry, but right now it's just in the gestation process. But it's an idea that I think could travel once these. What is the word I just said? Stories. Thank you. I'm nervous. I don't know why. Well, because it isn't informed, but we sense the inspiration. 13 lovely little stories that we can bring to life. It's you see the tapestry, and then you see these characters come to life, their drama or their inspiration. So that's where we are right now. It's in gestation. We're going to discuss this with Molly at Seton Hill and see where it leads us. And I hope it leads us to a beautiful birthday celebration of forgiveness and joy. So.
So we had representatives from the Greater Latrobe Chamber of Commerce, which is me, and then we had representatives from the Compass Inn Museum, Somerset Historic Center, Ponte, is that how you say it? Okay. And then you're from the Forestry. So one of our ideas was a America 250 Restaurant Week, as I've experienced doing a restaurant week before. Part of that is focusing on like some of the tri-county areas, more famous edible items, and also some drinks as well. We were talking about historic drink recipes and how they're different from their more contemporary counterparts.
So, another thing at the Historical Center, we do a lot of genealogy. And one of the things that really is evident is we have connections all over the country. We talked about the gateway to the West. So we see people returning back to southwestern Pennsylvania to discover some of those roots. So one of the things that we talked about was, trying to bring that family research, that genealogy into this discussion, and how we can help people tie themselves back to that American 250 and going back through their family lineage.
And then adding to that, many of our larger towns, like Ligonier, are made up of very small towns that have lost their identity over the time. But if you think back what Lisa said about Hannistown, it kind of was a center of the county, and then it went away to Greensburg. Well, Ligonier has little towns called Darlington, Waterford, Wilpon, Loughlintown, Rector. All of these, how many of you know, when you think of Ligonier, do you think of any of those? So kind of trying to bring back that connectivity of those people who are Waterfordites and Loughlintownnians, and celebrating your community within that larger community. And I'm sure every one of us have a community around us that we were originally from that we aren't from anymore because we've got a different zip code now. So we talked about how do we connect back to those actual roots.
The other thing, Dawn, that we mentioned was utilizing the Go Laurel Highlands app and the trail section to do some of the activities in a trail.
That's a really good one. And I'll just add, based on the table over here, who's sitting here, genealogy and trees and family trees and trees and trees and trees and trees.
Hello. One of the things, I'll just add, we have a lot of communities in the Derry area. I'm from Derry Borough Council. That the same thing. I'll advertise that there's going to be. We did a decorating contest, and it was Elmadale, and no one calls it Elmadale anymore, and nobody even knew where that was. But I grew up there, so I knew it was called Elmadale. So we have a ton of communities like that, and even our 4 wards of the borough were once known as villages of Goosetown and Pottery Town and some other names, and that's a great idea. I love that. One of the things that we were talking about, I'll let Clean Waste talk about their, or I can talk about the greatest American cleanup that they're partnering with to do with the different municipalities, and I think that'd be a great way to prepare for these celebrations. And we have a representative from Ligonier Writers here, and one of the things I talked about was maybe doing a living history or folklore history workshop whereby we sort of train hobbyists or people interested in maybe genealogy and things to record people's stories. And that's one of the things that we're working on in Derry Borough is with the Bigfoot initiative, is the importance of passing stories down generation to generation. Because we have a lot of history in our town that we really don't have we don't really know why certain things are called. We have a voting district called Scalp Level, and no one really knows exactly why it's called Scalp Level. There's some, interesting stories on why it's called Scalp Levels, but there's nothing really written down about it. But on the voting records, it's Scalp Level. And so maybe doing a workshop with how to preserve people's stories, pass them down, what to do with them once you've got it, so that, once you write it down, it doesn't sort of lose its significance, how to maybe submit them to a historical society to make sure they have a record of it, and all that stuff. And we're working on a bunch of different events in our town to build our community back up, and any one of those events could really tie into the America 250. So, anybody else?
So one of the things I thought was interesting with these nice folks here who deal with your garbage collect unique items like clippers, phones, things that just seem kind of unique. And those objects become the dream of archaeologists in the future. So we had talked about maybe having a program where we could bring kids in to see if they could see what that technology is. Especially if on that object it says it's made in Jeanette, PA, or Pittsburgh, it's not everything comes from Japan or China. And then they could partner with another museum to bring in maybe historical artifacts that were garbage at Fort Necessity and talk about how that's now a prized artifact to talk about what we did in the past and how these items talk about our ancestors and what our garbage will tell the future. So again, you kind of think, how can we make this work? But it all ties in. Again, our story, it's real easy, as I said to this table here, that, okay, Fort Necessity, it's easy. They got George Washington, they got it. But it's our story for 250 years, whether it happened last year, 100 years ago, whatever. It's a birthday of all that stuff going on and a way of telling that story. So it's great brainstorming here. And again, partnering with groups that maybe want to have programs. I mean, I have an auditorium. These folks have offered up a place where we can have guest speakers come, talking about their books, dealing with maybe the Revolution or another part of American history. So it's a great way to partner things in, even Bigfoot, but we include Bigfoot. So, but anyway, but that's what we came up with.
Okay, does anybody have anything at this table to share? And I will just say, as a mom, if you want kids to get interested in your program, just talk about poop or blood. Because they love those two topics. The grosser, the better.
We just briefly discussed a collaboration. Adam from the 9/11 Memorial, we talked about the Westmoreland Symphony and the Johnstown Symphony joining forces to do something at the memorial. And I believe that would be a pretty epic event. And so, yeah, that was our discussion. Yes, we solved the parking problem in Greensboro. You're welcome.
I'm just impressed and overwhelmed by the ideas you got. Oh, one more table? Do we have the librarians there? Do you have some ideas? Do you guys have any ideas you want to share? Okay, I'm sorry.
I just want to encourage everyone. I mean, the county libraries are actively brainstorming things that go on, but as you plan them, please consider reaching out to your local library to share. Because as people come in and visit, I hope that libraries are universally known as a place for information. So please share your information so that we can get it out there and support our communities however we can. Especially if you're collecting stories, there's an initiative going on now for PA photos and documents, where the state is encouraging folks to upload all of those, like all those stories and images and anything that you have into a searchable database online. And it's a database that you can search now with your library card. You get on, link to the Access PA photos and documents, and you can look up all sorts of fun artifacts and things. So yeah, just please keep libraries posted and informed. We are happy to partner with all of you because that's our goal, is to make those connections and provide information on what we have here.
Yeah, I was just going to add one thing. Back during COVID, when most parks and buildings were closed, we came up with what was called WEPA in a Weekend. And you may say, what is WEPA? So a little inside story on the Park Service. Like all of you, we all have our own acronyms. So in the NPS, you take the first two letters of the first two words in your park, and those 4 letters become your acronym. So if you think of Valley Forge, it would be VAFO. You know, so it's not tough. But here in Western Pennsylvania, we have Allegheny Portage, which would be Alpo, believe it or not. Johnstown Flood, Jofel. Flight 93, Fly-Nye. Fort Necessity, Phony. And then Friendship Hill is Free-High. So my title, technically within the Park Service, is the superintendent of WEPA, which is Western Pennsylvania. So when you take Alpo, Jofel, Fly-Nye, Phony, Free-High collectively, you have WEPA. So what does that mean? What we came up with was a little bit of a challenge to get kids out of the house and so forth. So we came up with WEPA in a Weekend. And so it was an opportunity to present to families to come to these parks And it doesn't hurt to bribe, to entice people. So every single person that came to those parks during that period got a little medallion. And it really increased visitation for a period of time. So I think working with Brian and Adam and Doug Bosley, who's Brian's counterpart for Allegheny Portage, oh, wait a minute, you're now in the fold at Alpo and Jofel, right? We can again entice visitation to the national parks, but also fold in the state parks as partners in counties and so forth. So heads in beds, great for Chamber of Commerce, great for Rotary. So again, showcasing in our case, the NPS, heavy visitation, and promote the 250th, working with all of you. Thank you.
And I will just add, I had the great fortune of meeting with the Westmoreland Library directors, and I cannot emphasize enough, bring the librarians. If you're making a town committee, make sure the librarian is on your committee. Make sure you tie them in with any events that you have, because they will literally bring a folder full of ideas to you that you haven't even thought of. So they're wonderful to work with. And I have a bunch of projects I want to work with you guys on. So I'm going to ask for a show of hands. So the remaining part of our afternoon is important, which is the business component of collaborations. And so I want to ask if you want to just remain in this room and we can just have our panel in this room, or if we want to move back into the auditorium. I'll leave it up to you guys. So if you want to stay here, raise your hand. If you want to move back into the auditorium, raise your hand. Okay, it looks like we're going to stay here. So do we want to take a break, or can we just push through and maybe leave early? Break. What do we think? Break. Okay, let's take a 5 or 10 minute break. Quick